There we go. Well, J. Krueger, author of the books of 9 and 10 Penance, back again tonight. Whoa. We're all done with that book now. So, I got my nice little setup here, and I think next week, sometime, maybe not next, anytime after the end of the month, I'll be back live again around town. I really like the views from Sherman Park. I think everybody else did too. So, as I said last night, I'd be back again to talk about the book, The Magic Paintbrush, the first novel in the series. And I decided next week I would read from my poetry books and do a couple of nights on that, maybe 2, 3 nights. So I got 2 poetry books, and then, well, I got a lot of poetry, but there's been a lot of poetry I've been writing lately, some fun poetry that I'll talk about next week. But anyways, yeah, I'll talk about the magic paintbrush, I guess. And I did a bunch of art for the book. I don't remember every piece, but all the art pieces from the book, which is you can get on Kindle Reads, as I said before on the other videos, those 2 books are on Kindle Reads right now for $2.99 a piece. But that one's in the Kindle version, has all the art in it. Most of the art is patterned after other artists, but I readjusted them to fit the context of the book. So like Starry Night, you see Fragonard's house and the bench he was sitting on, and the 2 hills from the story, and the tree. So people always, when I do book signings, they always say, well, that doesn't look exactly like Starry Night. And I'm, well, yeah, no kidding. It's not meant to. But anyways, yeah, so I said I would talk about this book. Hello, Nishanta. Well, hello. I'm talking about my book, about the art behind the book. The art behind that I made, or yeah, the magic or the art behind the book. I featured over 44 famous painters throughout history in the book. They were all different characters. Fragonard is the main character, the hero. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Jean-Henri Fragonard, but I absolutely loved him as a kid because his style really was a lot like Grant Wood's style of art, like maybe an early form of it, and most people probably couldn't see that, or Georges Seurat. Those 2 comparatively had similar art styles. But Fragonard as an artist throughout history, I think, strongly overlooked. He was a pomp and circumstance artist. He had an exceedingly amount of wealth. He painted for money. He didn't care about your politics as long as you wrote a check. That's the kind of artist he was. But and I think he did live in exile for a while. And when the French Revolution happened, I think people were pretty upset with him, so he was kind of exiled to an island. And then some of his larger pieces didn't sell because of that, and they ended up in New York and at some hotel or something, and they got those paintings for free. But anyways, yeah, let's see, all the artists I picked out for the book, I tried to do artists you should know and artists that had a strong theme of father and son or apprentice relationship. So I had Fragonard, Botticelli, Grantwood, Renoir, Summer Scales. If you don't know Summer Scales, he's one of the greatest seascape painters of all time. Picasso, William Turner, Monet, Vermeer, of course. Vermeer is the boy. Stefan Vermeer is listening to Aidan Fragonard's story, The Boy Trapped in the Painting. And the Vermeer in real life was originally largely forgotten as an artist. There's, of course, only 32 known works, and I think one or two of them were stolen in that museum heist. So now there's like 30 works known by Vermeer. But he was largely forgotten, and that's probably why there's only a little bit of his art left. Hello, Paige. I'm talking about the art from my book. I just got done reading the whole book on YouTube. But yeah, Vermeer was largely forgotten, and they used him. I think you might have to go back to the 1800s, but they used Vermeer as an example of what not to do in art. If you guys have ever seen a Johannes Vermeer painting, the Dutch master, equivalent to Rembrandt. But then I don't know, maybe they just talked about it to death. But all the artists I picked, I don't know. I grew up in an art home. My father was an artist, and we grew up around a lot of art. I just couldn't stand the stuffy nature of art. I got drug along to a lot of art shows, and the people at the art shows they loved to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk about the art, but I didn't always consider the art to be that good. You know, I looked for style. And I think each one of the artists I picked out for that book, they had to have a unique style of art. And that drove me more than anything. I knew a lot of art professors growing up, and they were all just very boring. They concentrated more on the pomp and circumstance of art history. And I thought, there's a lot of great art history, and you guys are just ignoring, you know, based on what you can talk about and what you can't talk about. So, Thomas Holbein, one of the most boring artists throughout history. Could never stand that guy. I don't know. If anybody has any questions, I'm just talking. I'm just rambling. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. This is all kind of new to me. I've been on YouTube now for 3 months consistently, posting poems and reading from this book. So that's kind of like my thing. I thought that would be, maybe I could sell a copy online if I did this. I don't know. But I did all the art. That has to count for something. The Escher print was probably the hardest. You know, I could probably just scroll through that on my computer. I should show you the Escher print. That was one of my favorites, but I did this one. I drew my own hand for that. That was tough trying to get the right photograph for it. And on the back of the book, I'll just look on the computer. On the back of the book, I did that piece of art. People always thought that looked like an elephant. But it's just the villain sleeping. God, I don't know what else to talk about. I tried to think of all the interesting artists throughout history that I could talk about in a book. Probably one of the most profound chapters in the Magic Paintbrush is the Ethan Bourdon. If you ever heard of Paris Bourdon. But Ethan Bourdon, oh, there's food. There's Denmark. Ethan Bourdon is kind of a boring name, but whoops. There we go. Oh, there's a piece of my art right there. I like to do strange type style art, I guess. I don't know. I got some art on here on YouTube somewhere. That one's called The Night Before the Spell, and that's from one of my books. that is yet to be published. Art collection. Here it is. There it is. So now I guess I got all the... that's my self-portrait of me as the villain from the book. But yeah, the whole modern art movement with Picasso, I had to have a book. When I decided to sit down, I was like, if I'm going to write a book, well, thank you. I feel like I'm really boring right now. If I'm going to write a fantasy novel, yeah, I did it in charcoal, and I don't know why, because like no one would publish my book, so I started making art for the book. Yeah, and I did several versions of that too, which I don't know where those are even. Oh yeah, right here. I did. See, that's great, but look at this. That's terrible. There's me as like a zombie version. Oh yeah, so I made all this art for my book, The Magic Paintbrush, which is kind of what this talk, because I read the whole book on, just got done last night. And I made, yeah, see, that one's not so great. I don't know. But I made, oh, cool. Yeah. I wanted to be a comic book artist, but I delved more into writing. And that's just kind of how that worked out. But yeah, I did. Here we go. I'll go back. But I thought, well, if I am an artist and I'm going to write a book about art history, a fantasy novel, then why not make some art for that book? And so I did 2 versions of Starry Night for it. I was worried that I would screw up and not get it right, which I came pretty close. And that's the cover of the book. But yeah, I used, what did I use? Watercolor pencil. And there's the Grantwood one, and that is patterned after a Vincent van Gogh painting that Vincent van Gogh redid a Jean-Francois Milly painting. Oh, the book on Amazon. It's on YouTube. I got a link on YouTube to the books. The Books of 9 and 10 Penance. And that's the background is actually a Grantwood painting that I redid. And that's just abstract. I don't know. From the island. Man, I did that one so long ago. And there's and that's from a chapter that got taken out of the book, where Botticelli and Fragonard go out to the fields in the middle of the night, and they he brings all the rocks to life, and they all walk out of the field. But that didn't make it in the book. And that's from the Rococo Garden chapter. Oh, that's pretty cool. And you've already published some of your comics, huh? Well, I'd like to hear about them. Hartro Palomino. Yeah, I'd like to hear about them. Yeah, I wish I had the patience to make comic book art, but I don't. I wanted to when I was younger, but I just kept writing. I think writing just worked out for me. There's Fragonard entangled by the vines in the Garden of Rococo chapter. And then there's Rayburn, the man with no face. Yeah, writing's a lot of fun. It's can be very meticulous work. I don't know how many drafts I have of this book. Here, I'll grab it. But I did, every time I did a draft, a copy of that book, I wrote the whole story and then I just kept layering it and inundating it with art history. So, like, I looked up terminology and words from different genres of art history. And, like, there was one chapter I did where it was all, I wanted to get the feel for regionalism. So I used all the word terminology for regionalism from the 1930s to make that come across. And I did, um, oh, what's that art movement called? I did Cubism, and I studied Cubism, just terminology for it. Um, so I could write this whole chapter that had Cubist terminology and phrases. And so Ethan Bourdain, the man with the Picasso, after he has his face painted like a Picasso painting, everything he sees is through the lens of the Cubist movement. So if you've seen a Cubist painting, you know, everything's off, nothing's centered. Well, I sat down, I wanted to write something. I really was dedicated one day about 10 years ago and wanted to be a writer. And I didn't know what to write. I just knew it had to have magic. And it had to have a magical element to it. And I just kept scratching my head and it all just kind of caved in on me. Write about what you know. Make sure there's lots of magical elements in it. And there was a paintbrush sitting in a cup. And I said, why don't I call the book The Magic Paintbrush? Then I can incorporate all the art history that I know into a book. That'd be fun. And so that's what I did. And I was like, well, I know it's got to have a guy with a Picasso of a face in it. And then we can do a sea battle with Monet and Manet and William Turner. And then I thought of like Grant Wood. Well, Grant Wood painted landscapes. And I was like, well, I'll put it on a farm, you know, just like Grant Wood, you know. And then I had this book I got and I started flipping it open. First character right away, Botticelli. I was like, that's a villain name. I'm going to use that as the villain. Okay, now I need a hero. I flipped to the next page. There's Fragonard. And I was like, oh, Fragonard. Oh, yeah, have a good one. But so I was like, yeah, I got to have, that'll be the hero. Of course, Fragonard. He painted, I mean, that's just his paintings. He's a hero. Thanks for tuning in, Arturo. That's kind of how it all like started to snowball, and I thought, yeah, I'll have a section in there on Cubism and regionalism and of course Renoir and just all the different characters that I could think of that I felt were important in art history that I admired. And of course I had an MC Escher chapter, if you guys know who MC Escher is. And I was like, yeah, I gotta have a whole chapter on Escher. Well, it came down to Escher or Salvador Dali, and I do like Escher a little more, so I went with him. It made more sense for a castle scene, like running around a castle. And all of Salvador Dali's paintings were all patterned after mostly desert scenes in Spain. And then, of course, we got to have a man removed with his face removed. There's the man with the Picasso of a face. Oh yeah, there's the sea storm, and that's patterned after a William Turner painting, Hannibal crossing the Alps, I think. So I just reimagined that painting, and it looks just like it, but it's my version. And there's a tree serpent that emerges from the sea, and so that's kind of how that ended up being. And then it's got the little guys on the boat there that are headed off to go fight this tree that's been painted out into the ocean. But yeah, that's kind of how I came up with the concept for all of it. Just write about what you know. And I wrote the first short story I wrote too. I got all the way to the Bourdain chapters. I got halfway through it and the computer went dead. And so I had to rewrite virtually the short story anyways from scratch. Took all day to do it. What else do I got? Oh, that's the end chapter scene. And that's just all off my top. Let's see here. I wanted to show you guys the Escher one. Here it is. That's the Escher one I did. Probably the hardest one I did. But I thought if I do all the art in that book and have an Escher chapter, I better learn how to make art just like MC Escher. So that's got, yeah, every kind of different device. I call it a game of chess. If you look closely, everything is patterned after a game of chess. And here's a guy, this little guy here, holding a pawn, and he's looking back at himself. And it's got a Mobius strip, but it's got the king and queen and then all the different chess pieces that are moving around this confusing chessboard. And then, yeah. Yeah, so that's, I guess, I don't know, that's kind of how I thought through it. I don't know. I'd never thought I would end up publishing the book, though. It took years to get there. It was quite frustrating. So at some point, I started making art for the book. But it's, you can only get it on Amazon Kindle with the art. The book's got the art in it, but it's all in black and white. It's just, they would not publish it the way I wanted with the inserts. So if, I don't know, I got the, yeah, see, it's all in black and white, unfortunately. But that's what I ended up with. Well, gosh, I feel terrible. Well, thank you guys for tuning in, those of you who did. And, well, I hope, I don't know how to pronounce your name, Arturo. I hope you tune back in sometime and tell me about your comic book. That would be pretty cool. But yeah, so that's how I ended up writing the book. I thought, why not? I know all this art history. Let's use all the terminology you can think of to craft and mold this story. It's obviously, if you listen to the book on YouTube, it's about the idea in my head was a father passing a craft along to a son. And of course, there's that struggle. Vermeer's father doesn't want Vermeer to be an artist. He wants him to follow in his footsteps and do something else. Fragonard's father, however, the hero, his father's like, well, you know, I guess you could be an artist, but you got to work hard. And Bourdon, the man with the Picasso of face, his father's, he thinks he's an artist, but his father might think otherwise, and kind of wishes his son would, you know, learn something. So, yeah, I don't know. I think next week I'll just return and I'll talk about the, and I'll go over the poetry books. But if I have any, yeah, maybe next week someone will jump on there and give me an idea of what to do. But I'll probably do 2 or 3 nights on the poetry next week and read my outlaw poetry, which I've got some fun stories. I had the cops called on me for reading a poem from that book, or almost had the cops called on me anyways, but by golly, my friend convinced him not to call the cops on me, and I just thought, oh, man, that'd be great to go to jail for poetry. But it was just poetry, so they didn't call the cops. This one I put on several plays for, but I'll talk all about that next week. I'll do a couple nights on just poetry. What else? I guess if I could think of anything else to talk about. I think I had a much funner time reading the chapters. Here, let me go to the chapter list. Whoa. The magic paintbrush. Here we go. Yeah. Regionalism was the main focus with the Vermeer chapters. That's how that ended up. But yeah, boy trapped in a painting. I mean, I thought, God, you got to do that. I think I was watching a Baron von Munchausen film, and that's where that idea came from. But, well, I don't know. But that's kind of where that idea came from. And of course, if you're gonna, that'd be fun to have like all about a magic paintbrush, and you can have a whole seascape. Like at the end of the Off Valparaiso chapter from the book, whoa, where I thought that'd be fun, just have like Monet's paintings floating in the sea. Just all the different art history ideas I could think of and make it come to life with the magic paintbrush. And of course, you got to have a man trapped in a painting, or a boy trapped in a painting, with all these, portraits throughout history. You got to have a man with a Picasso of a face, and all the different art history movements I could think of in different ways I could incorporate it into the novel and make it fun. Who else? But Marcel Duchamp, Van Gogh. Of course, they paint the stars like Van Gogh. But I had Eric Enstrom is the baker in the story. If anyone, he wasn't a painter, he was a photographer. His daughter was the painter, but just all the basic concept, all the basic people in art history you should know. Like, you've seen the paintings, you don't know the artist. I think it really upset me that most people, they might recognize, I ask people that, they might recognize Starry Night, but they don't know who painted it. I thought, man, this is going to be that book where I'll have all those characters in it, and hopefully if you read the book, you'll know by the end of it who painted that painting. But yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that. You can check it out on Amazon. I've got a link on the YouTube channel if you want to check out my books. I'd appreciate it. Leave me a review. It's on Amazon Kindle for $2.99. I'll return next week, and you guys can ask me anything, and with the poetry section. So, well, thanks for tuning in, guys.